Right. Um, Japan, Suzuka, 2025. Um, Always a great race. Uh, this one I wouldn't say was a great. Well, I wouldn't say this was a great race in terms of lead changes and stuff, but it was certainly a tactical race, and it was also maybe an indication of the state of affairs in terms of F1 now. It might have been a good indication of where things are at the moment. This is going to be a short video, another short one. I'm trying to keep them shorter this time around for this year. Not reading from notes, although there may be times when I'll make notes, but this time I'm just gonna, it's kind of just random stuff. Um, the First of all, let's just get it out of the way. Verstappen was, just a master class or a maxter class in this case. Let's be realistic. You know, regardless of where you sit on the spectrum of being a fan, not being a fan, liking him, not liking him, or being a fan or liking other drivers or other teams, whatever. You can't ignore reality. You can have your own opinions on things, but you can't have your own facts. That sounds like a cliche, but it's true. This guy is just on a different level from the rest of the field. And when I say the rest of the field, I mean the entire rest of the field. You might be a Hamilton fan, you might be an Alonso fan like myself, Norris, whoever. Um, this guy is just on a different level. What he did in qualifying was nothing short of remarkable. Now, I'm not going to be in the camp of saying that the car is that much of a disaster. The Red Bull is not great. It's certainly not the fastest car. I think it's probably the second or third fastest car. Fourth, probably a stretch. I don't think it's significantly slower than the Ferrari. I do think the Mercedes is a better car, and I think the McLaren undoubtedly is a better car. I think Red Bull and Ferrari will be better or worse depending on the track that they're at. But it certainly is either like the third or the fourth best car at the moment. Now, when I say third or fourth best, it's important to understand the context of that. I think that the car is fast, but very difficult to drive. Because ultimately, a car that's really fast can be difficult to drive and requires a very particular driving style or methodology to be applied to it to get the speed from it. And not only that, but more often than not, it will also be twitchy and kind of on the limit where if you make a mistake, you lose it. But if you get it right, it's fast. Um, that tends to happen when cars are fast but have a narrow operating window. I think that was one of the problems that Mercedes had last year, and I think that's what Red Bull is having this year. Unlike the McLaren, which has a much broader performance envelope where they can try different things and still get good lap time out of it. The Red Bull has a very narrow window to operate in. However, if you do get it right, it's fast. Is it faster than the McLaren? No. Is it faster than the Mercedes? No, I don't think so. Is it faster than the Ferrari? As I said, depends on the circumstance, depends on the track. However, with Mr. Verstappen at the wheel of it, it's fast in just about a wider range of circumstances than perhaps it would otherwise have been. Um, without getting into too much specifics in this video, because as I said, I'm trying to keep it short. I don't think Lawson is a bad driver. I don't think Perez was a bad driver. I definitely don't think Yuki is a bad driver. I'm a fan of Yuki. And in fact, this weekend in the practice sessions, FP1, 2, and 3, he was pretty good. I mean, he was within a tenth of Verstappen at some stages, which is pretty impressive considering that's the first time he's been in the car. And even this performance today, whereas it wasn't, he didn't get any points, and it wasn't a good or great performance by any means. Neither was it terrible. It was creditable. 12th is not bad. He did gain a position on track, and he gained, I think, one more in the pits. So I wouldn't say it's a terrible performance, but it certainly can be improved upon based on what I saw of him in practice. This track is a difficult track to pass on, and hence we probably didn't see the true potential of what you could have gotten out of the car based on the fact that he screwed up qualifying. Having said that, back to the qualifying with Verstappen. Now, if you have access to the data and you look at the telemetry, what Verstappen was doing in qualifying is pretty wild. What they did, obviously, was Red Bull trimmed out a lot of downforce out of the car, which means that he could get a fair amount of speed on the straight. But that comes at a price. That comes at a price of grip. And so what I think he and the engineers decided was, we're going to take the risk. We're going to trim the downforce off of the car so we can gain some speed. And we just have to rely on, his driving ability to carry the car through the corners and in the brake zones, because that's where you need the downforce. You need the downforce when you corner, and you need the downforce when you're braking. And man, now the data suggests that into Degna 1, which is a pretty high speed corner, Verstappen was almost or around 20 kilometers faster than Norris at the apex of the corner. Norris was at around 180 kilometers per hour, and Verstappen was at about 200 kilometers per hour. Now, in F1, a 20 kilometer per hour difference at the apex of a corner it shouldn't even be possible. However, if you're talking about like the best car in the field, like a McLaren versus, say, a Stake or something like that, or whatever, something around the back there, then you could probably say, okay, but even then, 20 kilometers per hour is a pretty big gap. However, when you're talking about a gap between Verstappen and Norris, the Red Bull and the McLaren, and you're still seeing 20 kilometers per hour as a difference in apex speed, it just defies belief. I mean, I don't even know how he does that. And he's doing that with less downforce. Now, that just, as I said it, as a driver myself, that just defies explanation. Then you look at the braking zones. In the last chicane, before the start-finish straight, Verstappen was braking 25 meters after Norris. Now, I don't even know how he does that. Norris is not a bad driver. Norris is one of the best drivers on the grid. Norris has the best car on the grid. And Verstappen is managing to brake 25 meters is far enough. 25 meters. You're talking like 70-something foot. That is, it's hard for me to grasp those numbers. I mean, you're seeing it. You're seeing the telemetry trace, but it's just hard for me to grasp how much feel you have to have in your hands and in your feet and through the seat to understand where the grip is and the level of car control that you need and the balance that you need, the inputs that you have to be, putting in neatly to keep that car balanced while you're doing that. That's some supernatural talent this dude is having. I mean, he's getting better and better and better. Having a slower car now is actually almost like it's showing up j- just how capable he is. Having the fastest car is like it just was too easy. Then it wasn't really showing what he's capable of. Now you're actually seeing what he's capable of. No, I know this is something that a lot of people don't want to hear, especially the Hamilton fans and so on. But it is what it is. This guy is crazy. This guy is wild. It's serious. Then we come to the race. I mean, you talk about flawless execution, no mistakes. I made a comment on Facebook recently as a response to somebody, and I said he's like an android that sweats. The later generations of the Terminator that could sweat and bleed and so on, but still an android inside a robot. You get the feeling that this guy is just like one of those robots that can sweat, because today he just was flawless. He just did not make any mistakes. And when you look at the sector times of Norris and Piastri, I'd have told them if they could string together laps with their optimal sector times for each of the sectors, they'd be ahead of him. The fact of the matter is, it's not that he's necessarily faster than them over the entire lap. It's how he's putting the sectors together. They're faster than him in sections of it, but they're not able to string the laps together consistently as he's being able to do. And so he's just killing them. I mean, granted, the margin was pretty close at the end, but still, it's obvious that he has a car that, if you add up their sectors, if you take their best sectors for each one, they should be like 3/10 faster than him per lap. But he's just banging in the laps, banging in the times, getting the braking right, getting the turning points right, getting back on the throttle right. Masterclass. There's no other way to describe it. Masterclass. And no, 1 point behind Norris in the championship now. Now, let's put that in perspective from a constructor's point of view. The entirety of Red Bull's constructors' championship points for the 2025 season have been earned by Verstappen. Not one single point has been put on the board by one of his teammates. So he is single-handedly keeping Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. Now, we assume that Yuki is going to get up to speed and start to score some points as the season goes on. But as of now, Verstappen is single-handedly carrying the entire Red Bull team on his back every time he goes into that car. I mean, let's not underestimate the mental pressure and all the other stuff going on around. That as I said, this guy is like a robot. It's like just nothing phases him. No matter what it is, nothing phases him. I thought, and the thing is, I thought Norris and Piastri drove well. It's not like they're doing foolishness. These guys are fast. Look at their lap times. The fact that they're so close together, as in those two guys are so close together, tells you that it's not like one of them is doing anything stupid. Because the two of them couldn't be failing at the same time. I don't accept that. These are top tier drivers, right? So the two of them are doing spectacularly well. They're extracting what they can from the car. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. Now, this is a particularly driver, centric type of track. I think next race in Bahrain, where tire degradation is a much, much more critical. Because remember, don't forget, Suzuka has just resurfaced, or big parts of it anyway. And so I think the tire wear definitely played into Red Bull's strengths, because that's been their weakness so far for this season anyway, and partly for the last season, where once Verstappen tries to put pressure on the tires, they just go away and he loses lap time. And that's one of the biggest strengths of the McLaren, the fact that they can run deeper on the tires. And so Verstappen has to be doing a lot more tire management, and of course that hits his lap time. You didn't see that this time around, partially because the Red Bull responded very well to the hards and which he ran for the second half, and also the fact that the track surface was very sympathetic to the tires. You're not gonna have that at Bahrain. Bahrain is hotter, which promotes tire wear, and the surface is much more abrasive. I fully expect McLaren to definitely dominate there. Mind you, I didn't think Verstappen was gonna win if it was dry. I thought maybe if it rained he would have a chance, but I didn't expect him to win if it was dry here. So I mean, I was not like Bahrain is a foregone conclusion either, but from what I know and using my knowledge of the sport and the cars, I do think that Bahrain will not be as well suited to the Red Bull. Now, that doesn't mean that Red Bull isn't improving, because they are. Yes, they're not the fastest car by any means, as I said at the beginning, but they are improving, because I've seen a gradual improvement in the car over the past few weekends. So each race it comes to, I think they're getting better at it. It's been understeering a bit, which is something Verstappen hates, and it's been killing the tires. I don't know if they've gotten around the tire issue yet, but they seem to be gradually improving the understeer problem and getting the car more to what Verstappen likes, which is definitely a nose, very strong nose and a tail that moves around. So they are improving. They are improving. So I expect Verstappen to still be competitive as they go down in the year, but not necessarily beat the McLarens. I think this may have been some circumstances that just kind of aligned perfectly. The stars just aligned for him this time around. Having said that, based on how well he's been driving, you just never can count him out. But I'm comfortable in saying that Bahrain is going to be a steeper hill to climb for him there. Moving on, as I said, the McLarens are on form. Now, having the fastest car and having the two very good drivers is one thing. What the team is doing is a different matter. We can debate the team order and should they have swapped. Should Piastri have leapfrogged Norris and been given the chance to attack Verstappen? Maybe. I think there's merit to that, but I also think that Norris being ahead in the championship now would have been a difficult ask for him to give up that position. I mean, in theory, yes, they could swap back after, but I just don't think Norris was in the frame of mind to do that. I also think he was close enough that it would have been a hard sell to convince him to swap. So I'm not gonna kill them on that one. However, I do think their pit stop strategy left a lot to be desired. One of the big advantages that they enjoy is having two cars in the fight versus just one from the Red Bull. Because Tsunoda being back there in 14th or wherever he started and then up to just 12th wasn't able to impact on the strategy at the front. And the fact of the matter is that had they split the strategies a little, not in terms of a massive split like one stop versus two stop or anything like that, but just pit one guy a little earlier and one guy a little later. Let's say you're going to pit Piastri when you did. Then you should have waited at least 5 or 6 laps before you pit Norris. That means you put pressure on Verstappen because Red Bull has to either respond to the early pit stop and hence be slower later because their tires are going to be older, or they're going to have to respond to the later pit stop and come on the attack in the middle from the guy who pitted earlier and has fresher tires. They did neither. They essentially pitted the two cars at the same time. That made no sense. I failed to grasp what they were thinking in that circumstance. I think that was a major strategy error. Would it ultimately have changed the result? I'm not sure. But considering that Piastri seemed to have pace at the end, I think it could have made a difference. I'm not sure, but it certainly would have made it better. Well, put it this way. Even if it definitely would have put Red Bull under more pressure. There's no question about that. And so I think that was a big strategy error on the part of McLaren. Now, in terms of the rest of the teams, as I said, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna try and keep this fairly short. I thought Mercedes was again strong. I think they just couldn't handle Verstappen. or the McLarens. And I think Leclerc really drove well to beat them because I thought Russell was pretty strong. And Antonelli, as a rookie, I mean, first class. You can't argue with what he's doing, right? He's fast. I think he eventually got fastest lap or something like that. So he's fast. Um, Leclerc really drove well though. Leclerc got, I think because of the kind of what was happening at the front, where a lot of attention was with, especially the fight towards the end where it was getting tight. I think people kind of just didn't really focus on what Leclerc was doing. Leclerc really ran a strong race and got it. That was a solid fourth place. Hamilton, I don't want to speak. I'm not sure. He's just not getting to grips with the car. Um, he's taking pretty wide lines. He's driving in a more traditional style of breaking a straight line, wide entry, smooth in and out. That looks good. It looks smooth and it's fast, but it's not necessarily as well suited to this type of car, I think. I think he needs to look a bit at what his competitors are doing and maybe adjust his driving style a little bit. That's my opinion. I mean, who am I to tell a seven-time world champion how to drive? And I'm not suggesting that I can. What I am suggesting though is that I don't think the style of driving that he's currently employing is particularly well suited to this type of car that this regulation has produced. But we'll see. The fact of the matter is, it's still early days in the championship, and there's time for him to change, and there's also time for them to adjust the car to him as well. So who knows? Um, Other rookies I thought did pretty well. Duan, boy, he's kind of. I was a bit enthusiastic about him at the beginning of the season, but my opinion is kind of my enthusiasm is waning. Let's put it that way. Hajar, superb drive from Hajar. I mean, bear in mind, this guy was super competitive in F2 and F3. So it's not like he's a slouch. I mean, you're not like expecting him to not do well because he's a good driver. But he's really showing he is really a good driver. Beerman also first class. I mean, living up to the standard that he had set last year at Ferrari. So undoubtedly, he's there. Um, Albon again, boy. Albon is driving. I mean, if you watch me over the years, you'll know I am a massive fan of Albon. Albon is driving superbly. I think Sainz will come up to speed eventually, but I also think that for a lot of people who thought that Sainz was as a four-time race winner and blah blah blah, and I'm a fan of Sainz as well. Don't get me wrong, but I think I certainly did not expect him to come in and dominate Albon, and that's proving to be so. A lot of other people apparently did because a lot of people seem surprised. I never thought that. I always thought Albon was going to be fast, not necessarily faster than Sainz, but certainly Sainz wasn't going to come in and roll over, and that has proved to be so. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic going forward as Sainz gets used to that car. Um, Haas didn't do too badly. I mean, I thought they were pretty strong. They seem to be. What can I say? I think that Irohasa's leadership style is a vast improvement over Steiner, and I think there's light at the end of the tunnel for them. I think they'll make some progress. I'm comfortable in saying that, and that's something that you never thought you'd say about House for quite a while now, for many years. But I see where they're making some progress. Um, the Stake and the Aston Martins, I don't know. They're just not really doing much. Alpine has its moments, but ultimately in the midfield, I think V Carb and has have stepped past them essentially. Um, so I think they have a lot of work to do to catch up. I think this race, as I said, it wasn't the most interesting race in terms of excitement, but it was a deeply tactical race, and it also was, again, just a remarkable feat of driving from Verstappen, and I give credit where credit is due. Master class. Bahrain will be interesting. Let's see how it goes. We'll see.